Mr. Chairman, we've got a good group of members here, so I'll keep within the time, and I want to focus on TikTok first. And we've talked about TikTok being the most popular social media app in the United States. I also think it poses a risk to our national security, and I want to dig deeper into that today with both of these panels, this one and then when the TikTok representatives are here later. My understanding is that under Chinese law, the Chinese Communist Party can access data of tech companies that are run out of China or have parent companies that are run out of China. Both ByteDance and TikTok have offices and they have employees in Beijing. So, Mr. Kane, under Chinese law, does TikTok have a legal obligation to give U.S. user data to the Chinese Communist Party?
Oh, yes, absolutely. TikTok will face, TikTok executives will, under Chinese law, face a minimum of 20 days detention if they refuse to turn over data on anyone in the world. And you know, this could be anybody, anybody in China, anybody who's traveling through China, through Hong Kong. This is a documented legal situation, and it's not something that TikTok, despite claiming to be an American company, can avoid. I'd also like to point out that TikTok does dodge this question frequently by trying to point out that it is run by a Cayman Islands holding company, a shell company, essentially. This is a red herring to distract from the issue at hand. So the American company, TikTok, and the Chinese company, ByteDance, both report to this Cayman Islands shell company. The company has never said how many people actually work for the shell company, the holding company, but we do know that the CEO of ByteDance and the CEO of TikTok are the same person. So this is listed on the Cayman Islands registry. The CEO is the same person running the ByteDance company in China, according to their website.
Let me dig a little deep here because we're going to hear from TikTok later, and based on the testimony we've received from them in advance, I think they are going to say they have not provided data to the Chinese Communist Party. Even if CCP requested data, they said they would not share it with them. Again, does China need to make a request to access this data, or does China have the capability to access it at will?
I'm not aware of the Chinese government having the ability to, simply open a computer and access it at will. It would usually happen through somebody in ByteDance or in TikTok. This has already been demonstrated and documented. So there was a BuzzFeed report that came out a few months ago, which contained 20 leaked audio files from internal meetings at TikTok, in which TikTok employees said that they had to go through Chinese employees to understand how American data was being shared. It also pointed out that employees were saying that there is an individual in Beijing who is called the master administrator. We don't know who that is yet, but this person, according to them, had access to all data in the TikTok system. So when they say that this data is being kept separate, this is it's simply a point that's it's a point that's been disproven already, because we have documentation that shows that the data has been shared extensively.
Okay, well, we'll have a chance to talk to TikTok about that, but I appreciate your work on this and your testimony today. We have calls for us to legislate more in this area generally. We talked about that earlier, regulations, legislation. My concern is that we really don't know what's behind the curtain, the black box, so to speak. We proposed this legislation called the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act to require the largest tech platforms to share data, again, with vetted, independent researchers and other investigators. So we know what's happening with regard to user privacy, content moderation, product development. We talked about the bias that I believe is out there in social media today with many of the companies and other practices. So, Mr. Boland, you talked a little about this in your testimony. I see in your written testimony you said to solve the problem of transparency, we must require platforms to move beyond the black box with legislation like the Platform Transparency and Accountability Act. Can you explain why that legislation is needed and how it would be used?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I believe that the Platform Accountability and Transparency Act is one of the most important pieces of legislation that is before you all. It's not sufficient because we have to address the incentives that we've been talking about, but to begin with, we are at a point where we're supposed to trust what the companies are telling us. And the companies are telling us very little. So I think Facebook, to their credit, is telling us the most, but it's kind of like a grade of a D out of like a A through F grading system. They're not telling us much, but they're telling us more than everybody else, especially YouTube and TikTok. In order to understand the issues that we're concerned about with hate speech and the way that these algorithms can influence people, we need to have a public understanding and a public accountability of what happens on these platforms. There are two parts of transparency that are very important. One is understanding what happens with moderation. So what are the active decisions that companies are taking to remove content or make decisions around content? There's another critically important part that is around what are the decisions that the algorithms built by these companies are taking to distribute content to people. So if you have companies reporting to you what they'd like to, and I'm sure you'll hear from them this afternoon, a lot of averages, a lot of numbers that kind of gloss over the concerns. If you look at averages across these large populations, you miss the story. If you think about 220 some odd million Americans who are on Facebook, if 1% of them is receiving an extremely hate-filled feed or a radicalizing feed, that's over 2 million people who are receiving really problematic content. In the types of data that you're hearing today, that you're receiving today, you get an average, which is incredibly unhelpful. And so by empowering researchers to help us understand the problem, we can do a couple of things. One, we can help the platforms because today they're making the decisions on their own, and I believe that these are decisions that should be influenced by the public. And two, then you can bring additional accountability through an organization that has clear oversight over these platforms. Whether that be through new rules or new fines that you levy against the companies, you have the ability to understand how to direct them. So today, you don't know what's happening on the platforms. You have to trust the companies. I lost my trust with the companies of what they were doing and what Meta was doing. I think we should move beyond trust to helping our researchers and journalists understand the platforms better.
Okay. To the other two, quickly, Mr. Kane and Mr. Roeder, do you disagree with anything that was said about the need for more transparency? Just quickly, I've got very little time.
I 100% agree.
I 100% agree, and I think that this committee is uniquely poised, given its subpoena powers, to enforce transparency.
Okay. I'll have additional questions later. Again, we got so many members here. I want to respect the time, but I appreciate your testimony.